My name is Jeremy Horowitz. I am the e-commerce manager for Lumi. For anyone who's not familiar with Lumi, we make lighted cell phone accessories. Probably best known for Kim's selfie secret. Here's one right in the front row. I am the e-commerce manager. I manage the day-to-day of Lumi.com and our Amazon business.
I'm Philippe. I run e-commerce at DVF and digital marketing. And I guess that's it. I'm from Brazil, so I have an accent sometimes. Maybe if I drink a little bit. That's it.
Rob Keeve. I am the co-founder and CEO of Flow, one of the sponsors here tonight, from the UK. And prior to Flow, I had a prior startup called Fitzback.
I'm Nadav. I'm the head of the account management team at Riskified, also one of the vendors sponsoring this event. I'm from Israel, although my accent is not. Yeah.
South Africa.
I thought I was supposed to be the only person with a decent accent.
Yeah.
What is this all about? It's a great point though. I wanted to make first a shout out to the sponsors. We got Flow.io, we got the Riskified, we got BVA, who are a couple of them knocking around somewhere in the back, who are one of Shopify's leading agencies, and .mailer, who I'm from. We're an email automation provider. Thanks. Woo! That's the .mailer crew. We do email marketing for thousands of businesses. I'm really bad at sales. So I think the first thing would be really great is just to explain a little bit more detail rather than kind of what you went into, just a little bit more about your business, kind of how you've established yourself, how many kind of years you've been going, and kind of current successes and what you're seeing as a business, really.
Sure. I mean, I can't take any credit for the business. I'm not part of the founding team, but it's been really exciting. We're about 3.5 years old. Let's see. We had a great retail expansion in the past year. We got into a lot of big brand names, which really got to give credit to Kim Kardashian Westport. Her being a brand ambassador for the company has really accelerated our growth. And she's opened up a lot of really awesome doors for us. And basically for now, what we're looking to is how can we redefine the content creation space. Everyone now is kind of a mobile creator. Everyone wants to share content on social media. And basically, like these two extremely high-powered lights, our core product is putting them in a cell phone case. And then we are looking to what is next, what else can we do in that space to really help influencers grow their own following.
Question again, sorry. Okay, so I work for the N Firstberg. You guys probably heard of it. It's a company that started in 1970, so I can't take any credit for it. What I can take credit for is the work that we've been doing in the last year and a half to rebrand and relaunch DVF in kind of in our modern times. Everybody knows DVF for the wrap dress and big wholesale business. And last year, what we tried to do was really clean the branding palette and make sure that we have a strong brand identity. And it started with looking at distribution, looking at our promotion cadence, looking at our site and our stores, and we embarked on this full 360 rebrand that involved every single touch point, both digital and physical, packaging, and overall our product as well. The whole goal was to become a younger brand with more of a fashion sense and more current. Being a brand from 1970, a lot of our customers were older. Being a brand from 1972, we didn't have a lot of control over our distribution. So this year has been a lot of taking control of where we distribute it and making sure it aligns with our goals. And yeah, it's been a tremendous year. I can say that we ended the year with a conversion rate over 50% above last year, so it's pretty incredible. And we did that just really thinking about the customer and putting the customer first. I know everybody says that, but we truly did that. We went on simplifying the site to kind of a more basic site, launched the new site, and then from there, rebuilt. I think a lot of people think that when you're launching a new site, it's about launching this site with a lot of different tools and everything from day one. I take the different approach where we kind of started with something that is our first step forward. This is like the beta, and then we start growing on that. So if you look at our site today, and look at our site what it looked a year ago, and if you look at our site a year and a half ago, completely different experience, completely different site. And a lot of it, one of Riskified being one of the vendors, and we've started looking at other tools that can just improve and make our experience for our customers better. I think I spoke too much. Sorry, guys.
That's great. That was great. Rob Keefe, so Flow, I founded with my co-founder Mike Brizik, who is here 3 years ago. The background to Flow is he at Guilt Group and many of other people at Flow were looking for cross-border solutions to be able to sell internationally. And the pain point that we kept coming across was prices weren't localized, they weren't rounded, catalogs weren't targeted to some countries, you couldn't work out duty and taxes, taking payments internationally was a challenge, and particularly with alternative payment methods, all the way through to shipping being expensive and returns being impossible. So what we wanted to do was build a business that made this simple and easy for brands to set up, and it would take care of all of the heavy lifting for the brands. And more than that, we wanted to make, as you said, Philippe, customer experience at the center of it. So looking at it from a consumer point of view, every site of our clients should feel local wherever they are in the world, whether that's Brazil, Israel, or somewhere else. It should always feel like a local site and be indistinguishable from an e-commerce site in that country. And with that should come higher conversion rates and a whole round better experience and greater lift. So we started the business 3 years ago. We're now 3 years into it. We've been very fortunate that lots of brands and retailers and pure plays have signed up into the Flow family. And we're busy expanding the business both domestically and in other countries. And we're delighted to be working both with Riskified and BVA and hopefully soon .mailer here in the US.
Riskified is an e-commerce fraud prevention company. So we work with leading merchants across the globe and help make e-commerce better for merchants and consumers. We work with our merchants to help them increase their sales, reduce overhead costs, and we assume the chargeback liability. The technology behind the scenes is machine learning models, and our technology business model was built basically from day one with the goal inside to increase sales for our merchants. That's about it. We work as we said with Flow and DVF as well.
Awesome. I've got probably the next question is specifically just for the merchants, which is kind of what other territories do you sell to internationally, and how important has it become to your business?
Sure. International markets are really important for us. So region specifically, we're pretty typical. Australia, Canada, Great Britain are really most of our international business. And a really interesting area that we're exploring right now is the Middle East. We're seeing some very interesting traction in some of the more affluent countries there, like the United Emirates and Saudi Arabia.
Why is it important to you?
Why is it important? It's a massive revenue opportunity that if you leave on the table, I don't know that I'd still have a job.
Okay, so just remember the question, okay. About 80% of our business is domestic US. I think there's still a lot for us to grow in the domestic US, to be honest. I think there's a lot more that we can capture of our own market share that already exists there for the brand. We're just trying to drive people to buy direct through us versus going through a wholesale. I think everybody with a brand is trying to do that. International, about 20% of our business, and we have a UK site and an EU site, and their own local currency and their own pricing. Our business is really complicated because in fashion and luxury you have something called price books. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, except for Rob and Mike maybe in the back there. But you have different pricing for each geo, and that pricing is not based on the conversion for that day. It's completely just what we set in that market, how you want the brand to be perceived in that market, the cost for that market, how you want to position it against other brands. So price is really not just the conversion rate. So our challenge is finding solutions that can actually support this kind of pricing, and more importantly, not just support that kind of pricing, but also support that kind of pricing in this kind of space that looks and feels like exactly like our site. I think that's one of the reasons like I've been talking to Rob and Mike and Flo for quite some time. The challenge with international is really just having that experience look like yours. Today, a lot of the sites that the experience looks completely foreign. You browse the site, but as soon as you get to the checkout page, it's completely different. So I think for us is we want to go. We obviously have a UK and EU site. We have our world site with services hundreds of countries worldwide. But we are very cautious about expansion internationally. We're now bringing back Japan, which used to be with a franchise partner. We're bringing it back into our house. We're exploring what we're doing in China. We're exploring what we're going to do in Asia. And I think more important is like when we go into those countries, we want to make sure that we go the right way and we go with our experience. Many of the big brands have sites out there that really completely look different than their own core site back in America. And I think one of our goals this year was to control distribution, and most important is that you control your own distribution and how your own site looks like. And again, it's just obviously, like you said, it's a huge opportunity. The brand equity of Diane from Furstenberg is actually higher internationally than it is domestically. We're seen as a luxury brand in the international market, versus here we're kind of the contemporary advanced luxury. So it's a huge opportunity for us, but we want to make sure that when we go, we do it right, and we do it with the right technology.
Can I just add to that? Sure. A few data points that we've seen looking across all clients internationally in terms of the upside. One best practice for international is typically doing 30 to 60% of your total revenue coming from overseas, outside of your domestic market. A lot of traditional brands are looking at single-digit percentages of their total GMV coming from overseas. And so the upside there is a factor of 20, 30 at least. And the second is in terms of conversion rates. Oftentimes, the brands are looking at 2 to 6% domestic conversion rates, where international they're typically measured in the basis points. 0.1, 0.2% conversion rate for international traffic, for the reasons that Philippe was mentioned. But not localized currency, duty and tax isn't displayed, you can't pay with alternative payment methods, expensive shipping. But if you localize those, the upside opportunity and the conversion rate, quite apart from the traffic driving, is a factor of 10 to 20. And the third thing I was just going to say is, when we look across different segments and categories, which markets are most attractive to them, there's broadly 3 themes. One is the greatest volume will come from English-speaking markets, so UK, Australia, Canada, South Africa to some degree, and English-speaking expats elsewhere, or English-speaking foreigners. Second is Southeast Asia. There are some brands and categories that resonate particularly strong in Asia. So the strongest markets for them will be Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and sometimes Australia bleeding into it. And the third is China in its own right. So China can often be 20-30% of their total GMV if they market well in a highly localized way to China. And then the underbelly of all of this opportunity is often the high GDP countries in Europe. They're not one of their core focuses, but oftentimes in the phase 2 of a launch, they'll find that France, Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, and some of the Mediterranean countries end up becoming a very large portion of their total share. So it comes down to both how they're positioned and how they end up marketing and localizing.
And I thought I was going to add some value this evening. I guess the next question really is about to the technology providers, and that's what are the common challenges that you hear merchants speaking to, and kind of how do you give them advice and guidance to overcome them? I guess from an email perspective, the biggest thing we deal with is like opt-in laws, right? You've got CAN spam in America, you've got CASL in Canada, and now you've got GDPR coming out in the EMEA, and it's like a total headache. And merchants are just like panicking about what they do about consent, and can they email those people, can they not? And but from your perspective, what are the kind of common trends you're hearing from merchants around like challenges, and what advice and tips do you give them?
Sure. So from a fraud standpoint, there's definitely different challenges with different international markets, right? So just like one example, in the US, a mass proxy connection might be a known risk indicator, right? But in China, it's very common, and it's actually the only way for most consumers to shop in American sites, right? So there's a lot of things that have to change and adapt, and those kind of adaptations also in the mindset and just like in the whole system and rules-based, whatever kind of setup the merchant has prior, are challenges that we hear often when a merchant is trying to expand internationally. Another challenge that we hear often are merchants that might have a call center that helps verify certain transactions with the end customers. And obviously then when you expand internationally, there's all sorts of challenges around that, because suddenly you have to support 24/7. You have to have call agents that speak different languages, different kind of cultural barriers, understand how to do that. Those are kind of the common challenges that we hear from our merchants.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think we hear three types of issues coming from merchants. One is around how do we control the customer experience internationally? It's easy to ship internationally. It's very hard to own brand equity, have a brand personality, offer high customer service internationally. So we spend a lot of time trying to develop tools for them to have a seamless customer experience everywhere in the world, which is an extension of their domestic one. Two is around economics. How do we make sure we have high lift internationally, not poor conversion rates? And how do we make sure we have low cost of shipping? And three is usually around resources. So international is usually death by a thousand cuts. There's always new payment methods, new shipping carriers, you could integrate new translation providers, and you can spend an enormous amount of internal resources just integrating other vendors. And so the friction point that we try to help them with there is how do we stop integrating every single payment method that comes up around the world, and how can we do that in a unified way? With one integration, get access to many payment methods, many shippers, many translation providers, and do it quickly so that there's a strong business case for going international.
What's been the biggest challenge that you face heading internationally, and how have you overcome it, or have you not overcome it?
We're working on it. I would say it's probably a lot of the same. I mean, we're a 3.5-year-old startup, so we have all of the expected troubles of logistics, shipping, returns are really things that we've put a lot of resources into solving. And yeah, I mean, I can tell you that the conversion rate on our site in the UK is so much lower than our other international markets because we don't display our currency in a pound. And if a customer has to go and sit like, oh, well, I want to buy a $50 phone case and then do algebra to figure out what that actually is in pounds, they're probably not going to buy as frequently as someone who doesn't have to think about it. I would say that that's probably the biggest challenges that we face. We don't actually experience as much on the support side, but we don't really do as much on call centers, so I think that's probably why. And then probably the marketing piece. There's just so many nuances to selling in an international market, and the relating to the customers in the way that they're used to is something that is just tough to do with limited resources.
I think I hit that in the previous answer, sorry for that. But I think it's really controlling the experience, and not just controlling the experience, but making sure that you have a local experience for each of those regions. And that is frictionless, that you're same thing, you're talking about customer service, that you're talking customer service, you can reach them, that a credit card is not going to decline because it's going through a proxy. Those are all like the issues that we face. But it's crazy because getting something international is not that hard. It requires a commercial invoice, and for some reason there's this mystic around it that it's the hardest thing ever. And it's not. And there are companies that you need to send it to somewhere so they can generate a commercial invoice so then they can send it to your customer. And there is this idea that it is so bigger, much bigger than it is. And I think that prevents people from going international. And really, like, to be honest, it's so, shipping rates are the things that go, it's the only cost in e-commerce that continues to go down year over year. Thankfully to Amazon, they keep squeezing, more people get into, start shipping international, start shipping using UPS, FedEx, etc. And we're all benefiting from that. So you can get something to China or Japan for $20 and gets there in 2 days. So it's like, why are we not doing it? You know, so I think that's really the challenge is, for me, is controlling the experience, making sure it makes sense locally, and then it's really like, how can you generate a commercial invoice and demystify this commercial invoice, because it's not something that's the hardest thing in the world, and there's technologies out there that make it very simple. I'm not saying just you guys, but there's obviously some really good technologies out there, that, especially with Flow, which, yeah, keep it at that.
Thank you.
Back to me. Oh, sorry.
I guess a question for all of you: if you were speaking to a merchant today and they were considering selling internationally, like what would be the tip or advice that you would give them that could probably make their life so much easier? I'm going to start from this side.
Okay.
So tip expanded internationally, I'll say from the fraud side. I think the kind of ABCs is to have the right data to support the transactions that we see internationally. So again, an example, in the US, we all know that social media is great to kind of identify certain transactions, Facebook, right, Instagram. But again, when you're looking at international customers, it's a whole different kind of ballpark. So you have to be acquired with having the local data sources, working with the local social media. If it's in China, it's going to be QQ, not Facebook, right? So the first kind of stepping stone is to have the right data sources from the local countries, which is the first step to make the right decisions on the customers.
I think oftentimes we see international as it's competing with other resources, with any merchant or brand or pure play. And so it needs a strong business case, otherwise it's not going to stand on its own two legs. And sometimes merchants get caught in the trap of just testing the waters, and they do it in such a way that doesn't properly localize. Therefore they don't see the traffic or the conversion rate, and that feeds them back into a poor business case, and they no longer take international seriously and invest in it as a project. So I think if we had advice, it would be do it properly. If you're going to test it, test the market as a localized experience. Make sure you don't start selling without duty and tax paid on the site, because that depresses conversion rates enormously. Selling DDU, duties delivered unpaid. Sell it with duties showing on the site. Make sure your prices are ideally local currency and rounded. If you present prices which are not rounded, it leads to consumers doing algebra, saying what's the conversion rate? Is this a local company? Can I get support? Whereas if it's rounded in local currency, it doesn't beg those questions. And 3, focused on shipping costs. It is a commodity, but it's a big point of friction for consumers purchasing internationally because they're used to it being so low cost domestically. So I think that would be our main focus. Make sure you've built going out with your best foot forward. If you want to test in one market, but don't test half an experience when you go international.
I have to agree, do it properly and don't do it alone. I've done it alone, it's really hard. You don't want to be dealing with trying to get packages across the border and chasing customers for them to pay the duties on their package. So there's a lot of good technologies out there to go and find it, and don't be afraid to partner up with people who know how to do this. It will make your life much easier in the long run.
That's it.
What he said.
Perfect.
What he said.
So before we go on to Q&A, we're going to go into a really weird kind of get to know them dating question, which is...
He's like, what is going on?
What you do Saturday. No. What is the best book or podcast that you've read or listened to in the last year? And I'll go first, give you some time to think.
Okay.
My favourite book is actually a really old one. It's called Good to Great. It basically analysed a whole bunch of companies who outperformed the stock exchange by over 100% and spotted the trends in what all of those organisations did the same that allowed them to do it. And it is so insightful, from management to business structure to process. It taught me so much, and it's a fantastic book. So Good to Great is my book to read.
Yeah, I would second that. I would reference that book all the time at work. Mine would be The Starfish and the Spider. It's all about analyzing decentralized organizations and figuring out how the leaders were able to build a movement that didn't have anyone at the helm. I just think for this specifically, it's just, you can't be in everywhere at once, like especially internationally. It's like, until teleporting is invented, literally impossible. So really empowering the teams to build for themselves and to support each place internationally, and so that you can just kind of bounce around. You don't have to necessarily worry about getting things across the border or duties and anything like that.
I would have to say I forgot who wrote it actually, which is really bad, but it's called Don't Make Me Think, and it's about just UX experience and how you should design a site, or how you don't want to have the customer have options for just have options. How to think on how to navigate a site or navigate anything. You want things to feel like they flow in a certain way. You don't want a customer. I always say, like, think of your customer as either a 3-year-old. I used to say 3-year-old, but now like the 3-year-olds are actually really too much. they probably would think of your grandparents and how they would navigate on the site, and the customer is, as much as you like to think that your customer is not like that,
They are.
they are. So design or think of experience thinking of that person, think of that end user.
The book that I liked most recently was Nate Silver's Signal and the Noise. For those who haven't read it, it's a great book. Nate Silver is famously a pollster, and it's all about being able to find signal, finding the insight within a lot of data, and something we do a lot of at Flow. And podcast, recent revisionist history, Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, I find great. Each one is a great vignette on life and challenging accepted wisdoms. I'm not sure there's a great business relevance, but it's just a great podcast if you haven't seen it.
So my favorite podcast recently is NPR's Built with Guy Raz. About entrepreneurs, innovators. Some favorite episodes for me are Airbnb and Dyson. Both have amazing stories. If you haven't listened to it, you should.
For anyone in the audience that's considering expanding internationally, is there a country that they should start with over any other country outside of the US?
Australia, Canada.
Anyone can.
Yeah, I mean, you stick to the countries that speak English, like UK, Australia, Canada. Those are very easy. UK, there's a huge opportunity. Canada and Australia, definitely not as much, but that's if you want to go international, that's probably the first place you go.
Yeah, I would second that, definitely. That's the easiest, and there's a lot of upside. I think China is the one that's got the unknown upside. It could be unlimited. It could be 10 times what you're expecting. We have brands who launched 4 weeks ago, and they've already beaten their budget by 5x. So you're unlikely to find big surprises in the English-speaking markets. You'll find solid expansion of your US business. But China and some of the other South Asian markets have the upside potential.
I just second China, definitely. It depends on the market and your customers, but the growth rates that we see from China, especially around the holiday seasons, are tremendous. Far exceed what we see in the US. 2x growth in China as opposed to what we see in the US during the recent holiday season. So yeah.
But it's definitely not the easiest. No.
You got another great answer?
Look at your Google Analytics. Where's the traffic coming from? And just go conquer that.
In terms of ease of shipping internationally, we get sort of going over the ocean or through the sky, but the last mile tends to be the most expensive. How have you guys approached last mile shipping for direct to consumer, and what do you think about for criteria as a DTC subscription model goes internationally?
So subscription models, oftentimes having the inventory close to the consumer works well, particularly if you have predictable models where you know roughly what part of your catalog is going to sell at what velocity. So thinking about warehousing in region, in Europe, in Asia, works well for subscription businesses. And last mile is important, not just for the economics, but also sometimes for the customer experience. If they see a brand they recognize, SF Express is delivering to me in Beijing, that's much more comforting to a Chinese consumer than DHL Express, who may also have problems clearing customs. So our approach is we'll integrate as many as we can, both international and standard and last mile ones, and leave it for brands to choose whoever they want, whilst trying to give advice on which ones have performed particularly well in different countries. So we'll be looking at the analytics to see which ones have the better customer experience, better delivery times, lower cost, and then feeding that back to the market to try to make it an efficient, data-informed choice. Generally speaking, the denser the population, the better their last mile solutions. UK has very good last mile, Australia less so, Canada also less so, China very much less so. But it's also a function of expectation. So consumer expectations in those countries is also lower, and they're certainly not expecting next day in Australia. So really, if you're shipping internationally, think about how can you meet or exceed consumer expectations in those areas. And at Flow, we have domain experts who can tell you what those consumer expectations are, but you can probably also Google it to get a sense of what's normal.
It does help that our country's only about 12 miles wide, so
Yeah.
the last mile's kind of easy. We had another question. Is it email related? I'm kidding.
So this question is more for the brands out there. Have you guys started thinking about GDPR compliance? And if so, do you guys have any quick and easy wins you'd like to share with us? And just in terms of like the general risk profile of like non-compliance, what are your thoughts on that?
You want to do this one?
I have to say that there's an email in my inbox about that right now, but I'm scared about opening it and trying to sort through it. Everything that's related to compliance, I can't speak to any tactics or anything that we're looking to do, but I would just say anything that's related to compliance just always is that cloud where you don't know where it starts and where it kind of ends. And when you're trying to grow a business, right, you have goals of growing 50% year over year. And when someone says compliance, you just try to kind of go the other way. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm sure my legal team will call me next week to discuss, but we can exchange emails, and as soon as I have some more feedback, I'll let you know. That's all. I'm sorry, I don't have anything. They want a question about email.
GDPR is kind of email, but
Yes, exactly.
but it's compliance, so I'm going the other way.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can I just add to the GDPR question?
Yeah, of course you can.
So GDPR is a big issue. The fines are very large. It can be a significant percentage of your total revenue. We have a domain expert here, Anna Tomak, who's just to your left, who studied GDPR quite extensively. It is worth taking seriously. If you are selling anything to an EU citizen, you are within the net. It could be a single guy. It could be a UK citizen based here in the US. Any EU citizen brings you within the net of GDPR, which is general data public regulation.
Sounds about right.
About right. There's a few different aspects to it. It's about how you control your data. It's the ability to purge it. It's making them opt in to any sort of transaction which involves sharing personal data. It needs flagging if you're using cookies on the site. It needs notification at checkout. It's worth getting your counsel involved or your external legal counsel involved to make sure you're compliant. It's a big open question as to whether it's going to be enforced or how it's going to be enforced, how actively and who they'll go after. It's unlikely to be anyone in this room. But it is a risk, and there are a lot of businesses who are being built just to be able to help. At Flow, we're trying to help contain the risk for our clients because it is quite extensive.
Here we go, another question.
Well, I just want to further on GDPR. I am a lawyer, and it is going to come to New Jersey and New York. It's merging here, so it's not just affecting the EU; it's affecting everybody. So, my best advice is build a good cybersecurity team, because it all comes to that. If you get hacked, that's when you get in trouble for divulging private information. And the EU has a big. It's very comprehensive as what they define private information. It's not the same as here, but it's coming. So just build a good cybersecurity team and pray.
It's coming in May, in case those don't know.
Yeah, May this year.
I think that question is more for you guys. What are you guys going to do for?
Go the other way. No, honestly, the other thing I can advise is that any platform or technology provider that you're using who is storing personal information about any of your consumers and customers, obviously do ask them about what they're doing and how they're complying. We have a force team of like 10 people literally only working for us for GDPR compliance in our business at the moment, from the email clients we use to the Excel files we store data in. Like, they are grilling us daily at the moment. It is insane. And we're having to we've got something like 15 developers purely working on GDPR compliance functionality in our platform at the moment, on how we delete data and how we store it, how long we keep it for. It is nuts. And it's making a big impact on all of our customers and how they're buying from us and their trust levels, and it's crazy.
I think that's probably like kind of the biggest advice is like probably partner with people who are doing that, because today like it's very rare that you have your own homegrown platform, right? So if you're leveraging platforms out there that actually is investing in this, you're kind of make sure you pick the right guys. That's probably the best advice. It is, as that comes into fruition, I think the downside to it is like you'll see less people try to do custom platforms and build their own, because they might as well just leverage enterprise level solutions that are out in the open.
Yeah.